Hi, everyone. I'm Kanisha from boldlivingtoday.com and also the Creative Educator Collective. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you've been here before, checking out the Shift and Tell interviews, welcome back. So Carrie and I have put together this interview series talking to educators who are currently in the classroom, currently working with an educational organization, nonprofit, and they are making a shift in their career, and also talking to educators who have shifted out of a more traditional role and are still doing educational work, but in a different capacity. So I'm super excited to welcome Jess Thompson to the Shift and Tell interviews. And the fun and funniest thing about it is that Carrie and I both went to undergrad with Jess, so we all have long history. Go Rams, Cornell College. I know. So it's just really excited to talk to her today and be grown up about it and maybe have a few giggles about our lives when we were younger. So hey, Jess. Hey.
Tanisha.
And Jess is a consultant. She's an advocate. She's a nonprofit administrator, and the list will go on. You'll learn more about her. But she is the creator of Thomke Consulting, which helps organizations with their transitions, definitely around equity, inclusivity, and things like that. But she'll talk more about that. So I'm so excited to have her, and welcome from Oregon.
Thank you, Kanisha. I'm so happy to be a part of this. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. I'm so excited to dive in and talk about all your amazing things. So let's just get going, because I know this is going to be a robust interview. So tell us what your current job is, your current position, your current role.
So I left teaching about 6 years ago, and I moved into nonprofit administration. And I did that for about 5 years, and then went off on my own to start my own consulting agency. And so that's what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. So when you initially became an educator, and you did that in your undergrad and graduate work, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then when you initially were doing your coursework or gaining your degrees and experiences to be an educator, what was your initial vision for your career?
Well, so it's really funny because I just recently reread the home study that we did. We adopted our son when he was a baby. And I just recently read our home study, which is like looking back at your journals when you're like itty bitty. And it one of the questions they ask is, what are your career plans? What are your career goals? And so I lay out this whole thing when I'm 24, and it's well, I'm going to be a teacher, for 10 years. And then I'm going to move into administration, and I'd like to be a principal by the time my son is in high school and launched and going into college. And I talked a lot about how I felt like teenagers needed a parent at home, that oftentimes we kind of think that they're cooked and they actually need us around, in the background. And so I talked about that in the home study, and that's essentially what I've done, except I've just left teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still in the moving into management, but not and not doing direct service either as a teacher or direct service nonprofit, but definitely more into strategy and helping people grow and thrive.
That's awesome. I think it's very interesting. And, you and I know a lot about each other, but I'm such a linear thinker in most things. And I remember my plans and how I had the same thing. And I was going to become an assistant superintendent by the time I was 35. Yes. And primarily I wanted to do curriculum development. And then I was going to be a superintendent at a minimum by 40, right? So not doing that.
Nope.
And I was still going to be living in Chicago, and I haven't lived in Chicago since 2002. So things change, things shift.
That's right. They do.
Okay. How did let me back up a little bit. So, I know you to be a really strong personality in that you will challenge the status quo. You look at systems that are broken or systems that are exclusive, that only allow certain groups to thrive and all of that. So with being such a staunch supporter, a staunch liver of those values, it's hard in education because we have so many systems that kind of don't make sense, but we are still doing them because it's part of the norm, or it's part of the culture, the mores, and all that good stuff,
Yep.
which is often not the best. So within all of that, what would you say your top 5 accomplishments are or were as an educator? Because, even though you're not in a formal setting, I still see you in that role. And accomplishments as defined by Jess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, you're so right when you talk about how systems are designed to get the outcomes that they get. And I think what happened for me is a big accomplishment for me is that I actually left education. And I know that sounds, strange, but I had a crisis of faith. So, and it was a crisis of faith around what we were doing every day in terms of delivering instruction to kids, and the culture that we were creating for kids really didn't look at how whiteness operated in schools, and there wasn't a place to talk about decentering that. And so I think the thing I'm most proud of is actually leaving education, because I feel like within that system, like my skill set is definitely best as like an outside agitator. And I don't think that within the system, I was an instructional coach. And I don't think that, that my skill set really matched with the slow, steady push over time to disrupt white dominance in the classroom. And that's, it's so difficult to talk about in schools and to examine in schools. So I think that for me, leaving, I have a bigger impact now than I did in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. So what types of things have you been able to, like, would you put on a marker, like as defined by you, a success marker with this shift you made? You're like, this crisis of faith led to your shift. So you feel like you're more impactful, making a bigger impact by being this outside agitator, and and your skill set is better matched in this role of shifting outside of the formal educational setting to purposely impact the formal educational setting. So what would you say your success markers are within that?
I think developing relationships with other women who are also doing this work, specifically women of color who are doing this work. And so part of the work that I do, and it's only part of it, is that is doing equity and inclusion work, racial equity and inclusion work with nonprofits and schools. And so I won't take a contract unless there's an inclusion rider that says that there's a woman of color that makes more than I do, and we go in and we do the work together. So those relationships have been really important to me, and I've learned a lot from them. And there are a variety of schools and nonprofits that we've gone into and done the hard work of looking how whiteness is, it shows up everywhere in the United States and around the world, but especially in Portland, it's its own like special kind of toxicity because it fronts as like this like really liberal progressive place that's actually like, when you look at both investment and outcome, our numbers are horrific for children of color. And yet our schools are run by, liberal, progressive, people like me who are trying to do the right thing and yet don't have the opportunity to examine how whiteness shows up. And so in terms of successes, helping organizations with succession plans. I can't talk specifically about the clients because I can't name them, but I can say that there have been situations, a few situations where there are clients who work on succession planning because they might have like a staff that's majority of color, but then leadership is all white. And then we surface that. We talk about wealth distribution. We talk about people's skills, and we talk about like why are certain things valued. And then we help them over time start to look at succession planning, which is a big part of redistributing wealth and power, and what that looks like in an organization. So those, I've been really proud of that. Lakeitha Elliott and I run a women's women's ED cohort for white women who are working to promote racial equity in their organizations. So a lot of that work, we have 7 women who meet monthly, and we talk about the struggles that they're facing, because a lot of it is a lot of this work is really internal, and like helping people like examine biases and background and proximity to values that uphold whiteness, and then how to start to challenge those. But as leaders, it's hard to be really vulnerable in those spaces. So we created a space for women to do that. And there's been big shift and growth in that group. And I feel like that I'm also really proud of that particular group of women. And I've learned so much from them and from Lakeitha about how to push this work forward.
Jess, that's really amazing, because it's not a topic that a lot of people are really comfortable with, especially I have found in my experience as an educator. You would think educators would be wanting to talk about this and examine it and unpack it and all of that. And sometimes it's like, no, I'm just here for all the kids, but there's no, there's no true discussion around it, or like you said, examining of internal things. So this, this leadership vulnerability, I think that's a huge, these are your words that I've written down. Leadership vulnerability, that is a huge factor, I think, in allowing people to have an appropriate shift at their right time, because how we come to it is how we come to it. And I don't want to have any judgment about, oh, you should have known this by age whatever or year whatever in education. No, it comes to us when it comes to us, but being able to have that soft place to land when you like, I should have known better, or I should have done something differently, and have that vulnerability and that safe space, I think is really crucial for any type of shift, but specifically with the work you're doing. So that's amazing that you have been able to co-create that. So how would you say your creativity, I'm big on creativity. Jess was really instrumental in me coming out to Portland and doing a whole workshop on fully journaling. And, I know you're a huge supporter in like creative thinking and living and every aspect that can touch your life, but specifically to, your shift, your accomplishments, the work you're doing. How would you say creativity plays a role?
I would say radical traditionalist. And so I think that like there are like, I'm very like you, like very linear and very systems oriented. And I'm always looking for ways in which connections are made and how we can change systems so that they're more equitable. And so for me, I think creativity values the connections and like the human village, but then also is looking for ways in which we can alter it to make it better. And that it's really a life, it's a way of approaching life, is saying like, this is, school is about, education is important, education is valuable, and how can we make it better? How can we do better? So I think that is really the creativity piece for me.
I see. If it feels like when you say that, then if you are coming from that mindset or value system, then that creativity is always going to be there, based on whatever comes up.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I like that. I like that. And just because people are like, oh, I'm not that creative, and they attach it more to a production of like a work of art.
Yes.
Only.
Yeah,
and right. I love how you've made that more expansive in the way that you explain that. I love that. Okay, so here's a harder question. Identity risk. I
Yeah.
love to ask this question about people making shifts and what
Mhm.
do they do with their identity from their previous role or roles when they are moving to something that might seem risky. I think about myself, leaving a really, prestigious job, at a
Mhm.
large flagship institution and doing great at the job, like knocking it out of the box, and then I like, hey, I decided I'm gonna do something on my own, and people are like, are you crazy? What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Did you bump your head? And it's like identity risk, like I'm taking the risk, and it's also a risk on my identity. So when you decided you're gonna start your
Mhm.
consulting and do or even move to nonprofit,
Yeah.
whichever, like how did you deal with identity risk? What did you do to take care of yourself? Like how did you
Mm.
go about it?
Well, I've been married to the same guy, Chris Lidke, for 21 years, and having his support, his full support, both financially and like intellectually and emotionally, is crucial. So I'm really privileged in that sense that I have a life partner that is so supportive of me, and I walk every day, and so I do a lot of walking for self-care, and it would, because it came out of a crisis of faith, like, oh my God, I am perpetuating this. It was, I am, the outcomes that we're getting for Black and Brown children are because of things that systems that I am culpable in. And so for me, it wasn't a hard leave because I knew it was like, I really felt like at that time and place that I didn't have the tools needed and necessary to make the shift in this big bureaucracy. And at the same time, my son was coming up. My son is a person of color. He was coming up.
Sorry, that was my little timer. Go ahead.
No worries. And he was coming up in a school system that was supposedly a really good school, yada yada, in public school. And he the learning challenges and the cultural challenges that he was experiencing in the school were exactly what I learned about in terms of how the system works and how it impacts Black and Brown children. And I was like, oh hell no, this is not going to happen to my son. Oh wait, it's happening to my son.
Yeah.
And then I had this like crisis of faith. And so for me, it was actually, I think, easier than possibly it would be for other people, because it was like partially I needed to step away from it so that I could see it more clearly. I think I was so young when I got into teaching and so idealistic. And so it was I didn't feel that sense of like loss. And part of it too was that I had been out of the classroom. So I've been an instructional coach. So I think that was part of it too, was that having that, I think it would have been more difficult for me if I had been a teacher, but I was really working with adults at that time.
Okay.
And so I think that was kind of like the step out of the classroom that made it. I think leaving the kids would have been a more difficult shift for me, like just going from the classroom teacher to not. So
Yeah, I think that, I hadn't really thought about that for myself because I was in an administrative role when I shifted. I wasn't directly in the classroom at that time.
yeah.
That's a good point. That might be something to explore if you're coming right out of the classroom and shifting into something else. Thanks for that. So, you talked a lot about your support and different systems you had in your life, specifically around self-care, and I would say radical self-care, just because teachers sometimes are the worst at that. Been there. Did any major fears come out or come up during this shift? Anything that you're still kind of like, I mean, we're always dealing with fears, but like one that keeps permeating, or, what was that like for you?
Fears. I mean, it was a leap of faith, and I think I was fortunate also to land with in a nonprofit in an operations role where and work with the best boss I will possibly ever have. And she's a mentor, Dineshko Otero Serrano, and she was a mentor for me about humans and about how we organize our organizations. And so I was in this like hungry learning place, which I'm still in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fear that I experienced was it has been more about like financial contribution and like that piece of it for the family. And a part of what I do, so the other part of my work is really around organizational, helping new managers and organizations learn so best practices in HR and adult learning theory and coaching and all of those things. And so that, 1.5 years in, that piece of the work is getting bigger. And so I'm trusting more that that it'll, that it's going to continue to grow. But really like capitalism, like oppression and specifically racism was designed for, I believe, for capitalism. And so much of this is like tied to capitalism. And so like starting to like step away from the belief that value is tied to how much you earn or how much your 401k is or how stable your paychecks are. Because when you go into business for yourself, like you can go, a couple of months where it's dry, and then all of a sudden you just have to trust that it's going to come in, and you have to hustle and work hard too. But it does. And so that piece of it, learning to overcome that fear when you've been tied to a paycheck and, all that stuff for so long. And like, it's a privilege to be able to not do that, obviously. And so it's really my proximity to my husband that allowed me to do this, and his support for it. So,
yeah. I mean, I would say the same. Like, I talk to people all the time who want to go launch something, go out on their own. They want to invest in a training or something like that. And there's the fear around the money, and not so much where it's always going to come, but just in general, the money, the relationship with the money, to the money. And what I have to tell myself and have to tell clients, just what you say, there has to be a trust factor that you can earn.
Yeah.
If you can earn, then you can figure that out first. And secondly, you have to, I think, re-examine, recalibrate your relationship with money.
Yes.
Is money going to be about actual physical exchange of money, or is it going to be about like something you're banking for later, whether it's building your community, building a client base that later will, have a huge return on investment. So that might be another topic to discuss too, because I know I've had questions coming up specifically about the S.H.I.F.T framework training and around the price of it, the investment of it. And, I feel like people don't want to talk about manifesting and all of that. And I won't say all that, but you have to believe you can.
Exactly.
And then after that, things happen. I mean, you have to believe you can make money doing creative things.
Yes.
And then you get on a Dr. Oz show and you don't know that's coming. But, you have to believe that your skills and stuff are awesome and that you can make money doing it. And then other things show up. So that's a side note, everybody. A little side note. But maybe we'll pick that up later.
So true.
So I want to hear, these are the fun, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, or whatever questions. Like, I want to hear about the freedoms you found when you, shifted to go on your own, and, what inspiration would you offer to, our viewers, listeners about shifting? Give us your magic, Jess. Give it to us.
It is the most liberating experience, both I think for the mind, when you aren't confined by the bureaucracy and by other people's expectations. And it takes a while. Like I definitely am still shifting into like that, into who I am. And I think partially that might be kind of like a little bit middle-aged too. Like you just are kind of like, who am I and why am
Yeah.
I here? And now I have the space to be able to do that. Right. And like, you know, like, and I can learn, like, that hungry learning place of like, I
Mhm.
have time to like think and read and, you know, make connections with other people, and then time to process it. I never had time before.
Mhm.
So, not that it's all like, you know, hanging out and, you know, reading and walking, but there's definitely, when your life has been for decades determined by a bell,
Mhm.
like, it is so liberating.
Yeah, and you can get to go to the bathroom when you want.
Whatever you want, like, oh,
I love that.
I love it so much.
Oh my
Oh.
gosh. And, you know, inspiring words for people who are initial shift, mid shift, coming out the end of a shift or whatnot, transition.
I say, like, you know, just do what is in your heart and your soul, and listen to it. And so many of us get into teaching because we don't know what else we're going to do. And it's like, oh, you can be a teacher, or you could be a nurse, or you can be whatever. You know, those, especially for women of our generation, we were like the first daughters of, you know, the women's movement. And so I think for us, like, breaking out of some of those molds and like going our own way, is liberating, both for ourselves and then also for our daughters coming up behind us.
Yeah. Something I would add to what you said, and it's, you know, in relation to you, I would say an inspiring thing if you're making a shift is to be with positive people who are also making a shift. And I say that because some of the conversations you and I have had just about nothing that turn into something.
That's right. Totally.
I mean, you know, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to have someone who's going to be rooting for you no matter what, and
Yeah.
actually listening to what you are saying and wanting to do, and kind of can see some of the spaces that you're not able to see in the moment. And I feel like you've been great at that for me.
Ditto. So
So
much. That is huge. That is like,
yeah.
I cannot over, and it's okay. I just was saying one more thing, especially because you know, you have that camaraderie. Like, we're social beings, and so in schools, it's like, that's your work family, and then when you
Yes.
leave, you need a new work family.
Yes, you totally do. You need another safe lounge work family.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
That's so.
No, I just was thinking, like, when you were just talking about it and just some of our conversations that have been some planned, some on the fly, but I always leave them feeling like, okay, I got this. I can do that. I'm going, you know? And that's not why we got on the phone or texted each other, but, you know, it's fantastic. It's a great mental shift in that moment. I love it. I love it every time.
Me too.
So tell everybody how we can learn more about you, what you're doing, where can we find you, where can we connect?
You can go to www.thomkeconsulting.com, THOMKE, to find out what's happening. And you can email me at jess@thomkeconsulting.com if you're interested in learning more about how to make transitions in organizations people friendly.
What about social media? Any social media, or they can find that
Yes,
on the website?
Instagram. Yes. I'm not on the Snap, but you know.
I'm not on Snap, people. I'm barely on what I'm barely on.
I know, right?
Truth be told, okay? Well, I want to thank Jess for joining us today and really being clear and honest about her shift. And, you know, like all of us, even if we've been doing this for a little bit, we're always shifting in the middle of it, in the middle of the middle of it. And it's really good to have a strong framework and foundation to come back to keep yourself inspired, to keep yourself fed. And I love what you said, you know, keep yourself in your hungry learning place. We all need that. So I'm hoping you will join us on October 13th for our Shift Framework Workshop. It's going to be fun, exciting, and robust. And definitely if you do the work session, you're going to leave with something in progress or something actually done, because we like to get things done. I'm a doer.
Yes.
So yeah. So I hope you guys will come and join me and Carrie. And if you want to learn more about the Shift Framework and the Creative Educator Collective, you can go to our website, Creative creativeeducatorcollective.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Creative Educator Collective. And you can learn more about me, Kenesha, at boldlivingtoday.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Kenesha Baynard, and also on Facebook at Kenesha Baynard Coaching. Everybody have a great day. Jess, get your walk on. Thank you again for the fabulous wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks, Kenesha.
Bye, everybody.